experts tell us that by the year of 2020, that the United States will need more caregivers than teachers. This is critical. And the need will put even more pressure on African American families than normal. We are now twice more likely than whites to report financial hardship. So joining me today for the second conversation on caregiving, this one on the financial impact of caregiving, are
Edna Lee Moffitt, National President of the Continental Societies Incorporated.
Good afternoon. Michelle McNeil Emery, National President, the National Coalition of 100 Black Women.
Good afternoon. I'm Stephanie Dilworth, National President of Iota Phi Lambda Sorority, a business and professional women's organization.
Good afternoon. I am Angela McAllister Berry, past National President of the Girlfriends Incorporated, now serving as the National Advisory Board Chairperson.
Good afternoon. My name is Victoria Cook, Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated, and I serve as the Corporate Liaison Chairperson.
According to AARP, 1 in 5 family caregivers leave the workforce earlier than planned because of having to care for an ill spouse or a family member. And family caregivers who leave the workforce early to parent or care for a loved one lose an average of $304,000 in wages and benefits over their lifetime. In addition, evidence suggests that assuming the role of family caregiver can significantly increase women's risk of living in poverty at an older age. So here's the question. How are people preparing financially for the possibility that they may have to provide or to receive care?
I think in my organization, we have a lot of informal conversations that are beginning to be supportive groups because most of us are now prepared for when a parent becomes ill enough that they have to transfer. In my personal experience, my mother was in Chicago living alone after my father died, and I thought everything was well. I went home 6 months to visit. I went home to visit her, and I ended up spending 6 months and consequently moved her into my home. Although Medicare took care of a lot of the major costs, there were lots of little things that I had no idea that I would have to spend money for. And I found that those are the little things that added to the quality of her life. For instance, we went to the movies every Tuesday. And at first we were going to the movies at 9 o'clock at night. But once I realized there was a senior rate, we started to go to the movies at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I began to pay attention to the sale items that she enjoyed eating at the store. So there were a lot of things that I began to do, as well as other women in my group that were doing the same things. So we sort of had an informal network that helped me to understand the small things in life that I wanted to give my mother to keep her happy, and at the same time be able to provide the bigger things like house, heat, water, and oil. So it was an informal thing, but I think we're all learning because I don't think any of us expected to be the caregivers of our parent as early in some situations.
In my organization, we've had a lot of conversation. It seems that a lot of us began to experience difficulties with our parents at the same time. We thought that we knew it all, and we learned that we knew little of nothing. It is amazing what we learned about the cost of caregiving. If you find yourself in a situation where you can no longer care for your loved one at home, after all the promises that you've made and what they've made you swear to all your life that you would never do, and you find that you have to put them in an assisted living or a nursing facility, it is a lesson to be learned. I learned myself with my mother, who had always been very independent and saved her money well, and thank God that she did. Her nursing care in a nursing facility, after the doctor told us we could not take her home, we would never be able to take care of her there, was $12,000 a month. And that was just what we paid to the nursing facility. That was not included all of the other things that she needed, things that we wanted to do for her to make sure that her quality of life was as good as it could be continuously. As I said, my mother did well for herself in saving. My father left her well. But The honest to goodness truth is, if my mother had lived just a few months more, we would have found ourselves going into our own accounts, our own savings accounts, as well as our own tax shelters that we've saved for our own retirements to take care of her, and we would have done it. We had already begun the conversation about, who would take what from where. With other friends that I have, they've lost their businesses because they had to use the funds that they were funding their own businesses with to take care of families. They've lost their homes. Many people have, even though they took family medical leave, they found themselves in long-term situations because even though people get sick, they can live a long time sick getting the right medical care. So it's very, very difficult, and honestly, I don't think any of us have ever prepared for what we are experiencing now. No one taught us these things. We didn't learn it in school. You learn through experience is really where we're learning, and so we must share with each other, and that's what we're really finding.
As we get older, Michelle, your mother was prepared. Mm-hmm. Are we ourselves prepared to share that with our children? To tell them to be prepared also, and when they should start saving, because we could be in an accident, even at our age, where we think we're not eligible yet for receiving care. So how are we going to help each other, help our families, help our children, help our communities to be financially prepared?
I'd like to answer. I, too, have been a product of caring for my parents, but in that experience, it made me say, I need to let my children, the challenges, I should say, that we happened, my 5 siblings, 5 of us, in caring for our parents. My parents are educators, but they did not wish to share any of their information. It wasn't until my dad was very, near death that he finally decided to let someone become the executor. And my mother, I think she died, she did not want you to know her financial status, but that's the problem. So at least I am sharing with my adult children. We're talking about it. And in my organizations, we're all sharing, so it's not left on the table.
Mm-hmm. We as a community will share some of everything except finances. We don't want people to know how much we make, mm-hmm. how much we have saved, or where everything is. How do you think we can address that? What cultural things do we need to break down for us to have these real discussions? Where should they take place? Should we plan on it at a particular time, or how should we go about just actually planning to have that discussion?
I have one child, and when we were younger, we always said, now don't put us in a nursing home. We don't want to go to a nursing home. As we have aged, as we've seen others in our family get older and need care, we told them, just make sure we have care. Make sure we have help, because we have to be realistic that he has a life, he has a wife and a child, and that's an unfair burden to put on him. And we talk about our finances. He knows everything. As a matter of fact, he tries to direct what we should do with our finances. But other than that, we do have a relationship where we talk about everything, because we're not uncomfortable with his knowing where our monies are, what property we own, how he could, liquidate things. He knows all of that. And it's that honest dialogue that we each need to have with our children or loved ones.
I've been very fortunate that I still have both parents who are healthy, though I had one. My father was ill for a while, but then my mother could take care of him. Mm-hmm. And the thing that we had to do was just make sure that she was okay. But they've always been very open about their finances, and having me as the person on their accounts long ago when it was uncomfortable for me to say, I don't want to be on your account. But but it did precipitate and help me to talk to my daughter and talk about what she should be doing. Of course, she thinks I'm just going to come to her house. Yes. But that may not be what, like you say, what you really want to do. So
how do we decide who in the family should be, or should there be a family member? Let's start with that. Should there be a family member who is over the accounts and knows what's going on? Should we seek financial advice from a financial advisor? How should we go about just doing that? I mean, what do you think are the best approaches? What do you see in your own organizations? What have you learned from the forums that you think we should be doing?
I think in some instances, in my case, I was 5 years old and my father told me that he would die before my mother and I would become the head of the household. And he was absolutely correct. He died before my mother and I became the responsible person. I have a younger brother. Fortunately, we talked about it, so he wasn't offended by the fact that I was the one on the accounts. I was the one that made all the decisions. But as my mother began to get sicker, we then took on a joint, decision-making process. But I think that we all should be very careful of not being aware of the friction that can come into a family between siblings. If the sibling does not feel that he or she is honored in making decisions about the parent or parents. I also know that there's something called elderly law. For those of you that have lots of money or lots of interest in keeping what money you have, that you can talk to them. But the main thing that you have to be aware of are there's expenses that are not covered by Medicare or Medicaid. And it also depends on where you live. So you really need to investigate your community. But I think it's critical that you have an understanding among your siblings because we're much stronger when we work together than we work apart.
Things vary from state to state. How do you think there would be a good way for one to approach finding out what resources are available to them from state to state, because they tend to vary? I travel with just a lot of the states for our Because We Care forums, and it has varied. It's interesting. Each state, we learn something different. They do things differently down in Durham than they do in Chicago, and different resources are available. So what's the approach to finding out what's available?
I would say calling the City Hall and the Department on Aging. Most cities will have a Department on Aging. They don't do the same things necessarily from city to city, state to state, but at least it would be a starting point. And also some Social Security reps when you go into the office to sit down and talk with them. And we're focusing primarily on the elderly, but there are people who are not necessarily seniors who need help. I had a classmate who developed early onset Alzheimer's, and no one knew what her problem was, but we knew there was a problem. And being the quiet person that I am, I just took her to the doctor to see what was going on with her because her family seemed paralyzed. And when I went by her house to see what was going on, she had had a shut-off notice for the gas. No one knew that. Her bills were behind. Her mortgage was behind. And through some effort, getting a psychologist to deem that she was not able to work because she was disabled, she is now getting Social Security disability. So there is resource out there, but it's just finding it, taking the time to work with the person and getting it done for them. And she is capable of taking care of herself day to day, but the financial piece, she's just not able to manage her own money and had let things slip because of the problem with not being able to work.
Thank you, ladies, so much. We're talking about something that we don't like to talk about that often, so thank you for breaking the ice with that. Again, we have a lot more work to do, so thank you so much.